Good morning, I've got another walking tour booked. I'm going to be looking at Soviet Vilnius, so the city during Soviet times. But first of all, this morning I'm heading to a genocide museum. Okay, so I've arrived at the Museum of Genocide Victims. There's a few memorials placed around the outside here. And the museum is now in this building on the left, which during Soviet times was, I believe, the headquarters of the KGB. I'm now inside, and this museum tells the story of both Nazi and Soviet occupations. It remembers the more than 500,000 people who were imprisoned, tortured, killed or deported to Siberia during that time. Well, it really does bring it home when you see these things in person. Paid €4 to get in, and it has been, I've got to say, really interesting to learn and see some of Lithuania's darkest history. This place was used by the Gestapo during the Second World War, and then the secret police of the KGB during Soviet times. So there's no doubt about the immense history. I believe these would have been outdoor prison cells. I guess some prisoners would get a short time in here, perhaps for giving up some information, perhaps for good behaviour, I'm not really sure, but there was definitely no way out. I'm out of the museum and I'm about to take a Soviet walking tour of Vilnius. The Soviet occupation lasted here from 1944, the end of the Second World War, until 1990. Lithuania was the first country to declare independence from the USSR. So I'm now standing here at the Frank Zappa monument. It's here for no other reason, I don't think, apart from he was on the list of banned musicians during the Soviet times. So the Soviets had a list of banned things. Frank Zappa was a banned musician. So, of course, what did they do when they came out of communism? They gave him a monument and put him here in the park. So something that's very interesting is that I think in 1989, 2 million people from the Baltic states protested against the Soviet rule here during Soviet times. It was right at the end of that period. 2 million people joined hands from here to the Latvian capital Riga, and then on to the Estonian capital Tallinn. This is where the chain started. 2 million people is huge because there's only about 6 million people in the 3 Baltic states, but that's where it started, a protest against Soviet rule. It is incredibly windy, so I'm guessing this is a good test for the microphone. That bridge ahead used to have 4 statues of Soviet soldiers and leaders on it. One of them was Lenin, but it got removed when Vilnius was awarded the European City of Culture a few years ago. There's 3 links of a chain right in the centre hanging down. They represent the Russian, Nazi and then Soviet occupations here. So among some very modern looking skyscrapers, but this one over here on the right is the Radisson Blu. This was built during Soviet times. It's famously the place where all foreigners, especially from outside the Soviet Union, would have to stay when they came to visit Vilnius. And the reason for that was that every room of this hotel was bugged by the KGB. This is an old Soviet-built planetarium. You can see the dome above the structure itself, right in the heart of the Soviet shopping precinct now. There's the planetarium, built at the end of the Soviet years. And this is like a shopping plaza, still in use. So the huge structure behind me is a stadium, or at least it was. It's now closed. It was built in the mid-1970s. It is at the moment, as I say, closed down and abandoned. So we're about to take a walk around the perimeter and get a closer look. So it is, of course, very typical of the communist era Soviet structures. It's very blocky, made almost entirely out of concrete, because of course that was the cheapest way of making it. Doesn't really have much architecture, although it does have a curvy front, as you can see there, but even that curve is entirely made from concrete. So it would have had a stunning location here in the city, overlooking the river and the old fortress there on the right of the shot, and a huge hill containing some crosses that we'll see either later today or Monday. There we go, a glimpse inside. Of course you can't actually get inside the building because it has been closed down, but you can see the inside looks very similar to the outside. And of course with any stadium you need parking, so there's a huge concrete car park, and there's also a concrete ramp that would bring you up here. You could, I don't know if you could drive up here on event days, but you could potentially come all the way up here in your car and then stop outside the stadium itself. Tour guides just said that a few years ago someone did actually buy this structure and the land with the aim of knocking it down and either putting a new stadium on here or houses, I guess. But apparently there's some kind of cultural heritage stamp that the place has, and it's not allowed to be knocked down, which is quite good, I think, because it's definitely a big part of the city's history. So I'm now on the side of the building, and the curvy concrete section that goes up looks like some kind of place where water can come down, but you get halfway up, and if I can change the exposure, there we go, you can see that halfway up there's this ladder and it goes right the way up, and I think when you get right to the top there's some kind of gate on there, so it lets you get right up to there before saying you can't go any further. This looks like the entrance for whoever was performing down into the underground parking lot and stage area. Well, it's an extremely fascinating place to be. I've been round the entire stadium now, had a good look around. The only place I haven't actually seen is the roof. I'm now heading up to the Three Crosses. It's going to be about a 15-minute walk. It's approaching 8 o'clock, so I'm going to try and catch the sunset if I can. Pleasant evening. So I just about made it to the Three Crosses and I'm about to watch the sunset.